Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. So COSATU says they're shocked that the ANC went ahead with swearing in former sports minister that is, Zizi Kodwa, as a member of parliament. Kodwa resigned from his position earlier this month after being charged with corruption. Those charges follow recommendations from the State Capture Commission of Inquiry, which implicated him in corruption for alleged bribery. Let's continue with our reaction to the story. Bring in COSATU's parliamentary coordinator, Matthew Parks, who joins us now via our video link. And Matthew, I suppose few people are surprised that this is what happened, given the ANC's track record, they say. But perhaps let me just get a sense from you around the optics of this. On the one hand, the ANC has always preached this idea of renewal, and on the other, someone who's been charged with corruption literally just days ago was sworn in as a member of parliament.
No, look, it's a really disappointing, and good morning, thanks for having us. It's a really disappointing own goal, unnecessary, unforced. It's very poorly thought through, it's very ill-considered. And look, the ANC did really well on the step-aside resolution. It was not an easy choice for the ANC. It's a very bold and progressive resolution by the ANC that says if you are charged before a court, you need to step aside from your leadership positions in government as a public representative. And that's a wonderful, fantastic thing. And it took a lot of fights in the ANC to get that through. And it gave a very positive message to society. The ANC is really committed to renewing itself, to cleansing itself in the state of corruption. And that is one of the major things we could mobilize workers to vote for the ANC on election day. And the ANC really messed up on this one, to be honest. There's no amount of perfume or roses you can put on this one. It just doesn't look good. And really, Zizi Kodwa had resigned 2.5 weeks ago as a member of cabinet. So what happened within 2.5 weeks? They said, bring him back, everything's okay now. Because the trial's not over, the charges have not been dropped. So we had raised with the ANC before it happened. We're quite disappointed they just walked blindly into this own goal for no good reason. There's no value to it. And the legalistic arguments the ANC is raising that, well, as long as you step aside from cabinet or from a leadership position, that's good enough. It's not good enough. That needs to include members of parliament, because society does not want to hear legalistic waffling. They want to know that if you're stepping aside, you step aside, whether it's a minister or a member of parliament or as a council, whatever position you have. Society holds all of these positions in high value, and it just sends a wrong message that we're soft on crime and corruption, we're soft on the renewal campaign. So we hope the ANC, we hope Zizi Kodwa will do the right thing and reconsider this move and step back. Let him have space to go and deal with his trial. We don't celebrate his predicament. This is somebody we've known for many, many years, someone we like and have enjoyed working with. So we don't derive satisfaction from his personal difficulties, but the organization must be ahead of the individual's needs, must seem to be consistently to apply these rules. And other persons can say, well, look, they were removed from the candidate list because they had charges. Why is an exception being made? And the consequence, if you don't apply this thing consistently, is that down the road, some other member of parliament will be charged, and they will simply say, no, go away, because you didn't force this one, so why should this one have to go? So I think for us, this is a thing the ANC needs to reconsider. We also would want to appeal to Comrade Zizi Kodwa to also reconsider this move for the sake of the nation and the sake of the ANC.
Sure. Very loud and clear. Zizi Kodwa was engaged, obviously, about this during the swearing-in ceremony earlier this week, and he kind of positioned himself as somebody who's just following the instructions of the ANC. So in my mind, it almost seems like the ball really is in the ANC's court. And even though the swearing-in has already taken place, it's not like the ANC's agency in all of this is completely sucked out of them. In other words, they can still do something about it.
Easily. You can resign as member of parliament within 5 minutes. Just send a letter to the speaker, to the chief whip, and it's done. And that's what we would hope would happen. The ANC can look at alternative options for Zizi Kodwa. He could be employed in a Tule house. They could talk to a progressive businessman to accommodate him in a company. So you don't send the man into the unemployment queue. But that's nitty-gritties. The point is we need to have members of parliament who pass legislation, who hold government to account, who have impeccable credentials. And right now, we can't afford a situation where a member of parliament is checking in and out of court on very serious issues of corruption, of money laundering, etc. That just doesn't send a good message. And society gave the ANC a hammering in the elections. Yes, there was the MK factor, but also if you look at the results across every single province, the ANC declined in every single province. So the MK was not always the issue, and that's because society correctly is frustrated, is tired of never-ending corruption scandals. Society wants the ANC to do well. Society still believes in the ANC, but they expect the ANC to show leadership. And this is a moment where the Luthuli House has failed dismally to provide leadership. There's no amount of perfume and English words that can defend this thing. They need to reverse this thing. Otherwise, this is going to be a millstone hanging around all of our necks. Every time we speak about corruption, society will just say, well, we hear you, you speak nice English words, but your actions are not consistent, and at times you are faltering badly. So for us, this thing can be fixed quickly, but it requires leadership on the part of the Luthuli House, because to be a member of parliament is not an employed position. It's a privilege. It's a right entrusted to you by the organization, by society. The labor laws don't apply to being a member of parliament, and hence the ANC and Comrade Zizi need to do the right thing and to reverse this thing. We've already had enough of a backlash, but we can fix it. And again, society would appreciate if the ANC does the right thing in this moment.
Sure, I hear that. You know, I find part of what you've just said really interesting, Matthew. You know, this idea of Zizi Kodwa possibly being accommodated at Luthuli House or finding some kind of businessman to accommodate him. I mean, is that not what part of the problem is here? This idea that if you find yourself, you know, on the wrong side of the law, the ANC will make a plan and somehow you'll continue to survive. I mean, I'm sure you share a personal relationship with Zizi Kodwa, so I appreciate your empathy around, you know, the consequences here. But the principle surely must be that if you've done something wrong, the consequences must be meted out, no matter what that looks like, without some kind of plan B for you to possibly come back, possibly.
No, you're right. And look, you know, society doesn't really care what you do in your own personal time. They don't care what the ANC does on its own private space, because there's not taxpayers' money. It's an organization's private business, so fine. But I think society does rightly care that when you involve taxpayers' monies, when you're involving a public institution like Parliament or Cabinet or a legislature or the state or an ambassador post, society will correctly be irritated and won't accept it. Society has the right to expect people who are being sworn in, who have sworn to uphold the Constitution, not to be people who are appearing before magistrates or judges on very serious criminal charges. And given where we come from, we need to do better. The ANC did a very progressive thing to have this resolution. It was not an easy one, and it goes far above what the law requires, because the law simply says if you are found guilty, if you are sentenced to imprisonment for greater than 12 months without the option of a fine, then therefore you're no longer eligible to serve in Parliament. So the ANC was right to say, let's go beyond that, because society is irritated. But now at the same time, the ANC chooses to snatch victory or defeat from the jaws of victory by then waffling and dilly-dallying and just meandering on a principled issue. This is a principled issue, as you're saying, and it's very clear. You can't have members of Parliament in Parliament who are appearing before judges. It just doesn't look good. And it denies us the moral high ground as the alliance when we want to hold other political parties, because other political parties too are not angels. They've got all sorts of miscreants and hooligans and criminals that we're now seeing being sworn into Parliament, a variety of disreputable characters. It's going to be very difficult to show to those parties that you are very odious in who you send to Parliament, because they'll simply be able to say to us, well, look at your own house before you comment. And really, it's just not necessary. And people expect better from the ANC as a liberation movement. They expect the ANC to have the utmost values as a ruling party. And again, because society has cheered on the president, Cyril Ramaphosa, when he spoke very passionately about a renewal campaign. But this just really sets us back. It's unnecessary. It's poorly considered.
Right. Speaking about the state of the House, I mean, it'd be remiss of us not to speak about the glaring vacuum in Cabinet. I mean, we're told there have been intense talks that have been taking place behind closed doors, the DA accused of making all kinds of demands. I mean, I'm sure you'll agree, the status quo is unsustainable, right? We cannot continue building a capable state without the executive. I wonder what kind of conversations COSATU is having with those who are part of these GNU discussions about the need to speedily resolve this so that we can get on with essentially the business of the state.
Yeah. So look, we're not really too stressed, to be honest. We know it is a bit of an anxious moment. We know there's a bit of a media frenzy and everybody's keen to see it resolved. We are keen as well. We're keen, more importantly, not just to see which character is going to which portfolio. That is important, but we're more keen to see the GNU being stable, being coherent, being progressive, and getting its feet on the ground, running quickly to address our many challenges, to growing the economy, fixing the state, etc. But I think, look, to be fair, many other countries, and we don't need to go to the extremes, but have taken 3 months, 6 months, Germany, France, Canada, I think Belgium was the most extremist, where they took about 2 years. We don't need to go to that extreme. We're confident that by Sunday this week, these things will be resolved. We think there has been significant progress. The fact that the ANC managed to put together a government of national unity with all of its imperfections to ensure the president was elected, in fact, before the constitutional 14 days period, to ensure we've elected leadership of both houses of parliament. I think 7 out of the 9 provincial governments have concluded their processes and they're done. There is a lot of discussion taking place between the different parties, and I think they're not that far apart from each other. At times, there is a little bit of theatrics and drama in the public discourse. But look, that's part of the negotiation cycles. Something we're very used to as COSATU, because when labor unions and business engage, there is moments of extreme heatedness. And at times when actually you get to the most difficult parts is actually when you find a deal. So we're confident that this will be done soon. And don't forget, the President Cyril Ramaphosa is South Africa's perhaps most distinguished negotiator. He cut his teeth in the National Union of Mine Workers in the 80s as a founding father of COSATU. He led the constitutional negotiations at Kodwa and in Parliament after 1994. So we're very confident that he knows exactly what he's doing and he will pull together a GNU. But we don't mind that he takes an extra day or 2 days or 3 days, whatever it might necessitate, to make sure we have a government which makes sense, to make sure the government is biased towards working class communities, protecting workers, that it's committed to fighting crime and corruption. And it's going to be a government which can last beyond a week, that it can last us for the term of office. Because if you look at your municipalities where they chop and change mayors every few months, we can't afford that at national government. So if they take an extra day or 2 days, that's not a problem. As long as at the end of the day, the product is one that society can endorse and they can really advance a transformation agenda.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, all manner of things have been said in the public domain, including the fact that the ANC at some stage was contemplating walking away from a deal with the DA because apparently they were making unreasonable demands. We don't really know what's happening behind closed doors, but I mean, I suppose theoretically speaking, it's worth asking the question whether that's a move you would support as COSATU, this concept of walking away if any parties seem to be unreasonable in order for us to get something that will last.
Look, the ANC, I think, is in a fortunate position that despite not winning 51%, there's no formula that can constitute government without the ANC leading it. The ANC has got options. It can have a government national unity with the DA. It can have a government national unity with the smaller parties. It can arrange for the DA to give it the supply to elect a minority government and the DA take leadership in parliament. The ANC can also go to the EFF. It can go to MK. And all of these options have pros and cons, serious pros and serious cons. But we don't think we're there. The ANC has already decided very clearly, with all the pluses and minuses, to go for a government national unity. We don't think it's impossible to get the final things resolved. But look, all parties are going to have to compromise. And the opposition parties, including the DA, also need to transition from being in opposition, where they've always been, decampaigning the ANC, etc., to now kind of adjusting culturally and politically and policy-wise to work with the ANC. But look, the ANC needs to be calm. It doesn't need to panic. It has this. It just needs to find what is the best formula, which is not going to compromise it in terms of its own supporters. But we don't think it's impossible to do so. We think that the progress has been made significantly. The major things of electing a president, electing leadership of parliament, have been done. So this is, it's difficult. It's not easy because you might think that, portfolio X or portfolio Y is not that critical, but you'll find there's a constituency out there which thinks it is very critical, which has concerns about if you give it to party A or party B. But look, it's a difficult thing. It's uncharted territory. But again, let's rather get the foundation right, which has been our sense as COSATU, get the principles right, because you don't want to see a situation like you have in Nelson Mandela Bay or Joburg or Tshwane or Ekurhuleni, where the mayors are chopped and changed, where there's no coherence. It's a rush for positions, and as a consequence, service delivery to working class communities takes a back seat. I think for us, we have to get the principles right, and we also have to make sure that whomever you take to portfolio A or B is fit for service. You can't afford to experiment with these national positions because there is real consequences for people on the ground, for workers, for businesses, for society at large.
Right, absolutely. Matthew Parks, appreciate your candidness. Thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. Matthew Parks, of course, is the parliamentary coordinator for COSATU, giving us reaction to the ongoing discussions around the Government of National Unity and, of course, the recent swearing in of former Minister Zizi Kodwa as an MP.